Welcome to this final instalment on the orchestra, coming finally to what is often the most neglected part of the symphony orchestra, the percussion. The percussion section is a hugely varied yet familiar place. Drums, triangles, cymbals, glockenspiels, tambourines, maracas. Are you noticing a theme here? We associate percussion with being a kid because percussion are instruments you play by hitting them. Pretty basic, you'd assume, but be careful with your assumptions. Musicians are famously snobbish about percussion players.
Question!
How'd you get a drummer to leave your porch?
Answer!
Pay for the pizza. Such prejudices are reinforced by the relative low status we accord in classical music to rhythm, and rhythm really is the job of the percussion section. And yet, once you open it up, you actually have the most musically varied section of all. All those different objects to hit, or shake, or rub, or scrape. Some make notes. Some more indistinct tones. These instruments have come from all around the world, and they really come in a huge variety of shapes, sizes and sounds. And from every era. Bongos from ancient Africa, or the vibraphone invented in 1916. And don't forget the piano counts as a percussion instrument. You hit a key, which hits a hammer on a string to make a note. Percussion. At which point, we should probably introduce the main percussion instrument for the classical orchestra, the timpani or kettle drum. These huge beasts can be tuned. Unfortunately, when you run the numbers on the notes versus space ratio, the timpani's not quite so great. Hector Berlioz must have really annoyed a few venue hosts with his rather large 10 timpani players on 16 rather spacious drums for his rather gargantuan requiem. But look, even 2 notes is useful for your classical orchestra. So, for a few hundred years, the percussion section was the most chronically underdeveloped in the orchestra, basically consisting of, or maybe, or if you're being really adventurous. So yes, percussion underused in the classical symphony orchestra until, guess who, begun ringing the changes, or should that be hitting them? And so, into Beethoven's massive 9th Symphony comes a bass drum and a cymbal and a triangle. And as the 19th century continues, composers were searching for new sounds, and things started to get more interesting. Liszt promotes the triangle in his piano concerto. A critic sneeringly labels it a triangle concerto. Wagner starts scoring with instruments like the castanets. And even hammers and anvils for the mining of the underground dwarves. And here comes Saint-Saëns with his introduction of the xylophone in 1874. An appropriately bony sound for the Danse Macabre. And then, ditto a few years later, appropriate bony sound for the fossil section of his Carnival of Animals. The 20th century really saw percussion take central stage. Well, not quite centre, you're a bit loud. Can you move further back, please? Yes, behind the brass. I know they're louder, but your sound cuts through everything. Anyway, the 20th century really burst into rhythmic life with Stravinsky's ballet The Rites of Spring. Notice how heavy the scoring is for this piece in the rhythm section. 5 timpanis, crying 2 players, bass drum, tam-tam, triangle, tambourine, cymbals, antique cymbals in A-flat and B-flat, and a guiro. What's a guiro? Classical music was becoming less afraid to centre rhythm. Look how central the snare drum is for Ravel's Bolero. But again, notice the expanded scoring for the piece. Also another snare drum, 3 timpani, a bass drum, cymbals and a tam-tam gong. Many modern pieces use a dazzling variety. I mean, just check the roster on Karloff's Carmina Burana. 2 pianos, 1 celesta, 5 timpani, 2 snare drums, a bass drum, triangle, cymbals, suspended cymbal, antique cymbals, a ratchet, castanets, tambourines, sleigh bells, tam-tam, tubular bells, 3 bells, 3 glockenspiels, a gong and a xylophone. The late 20th century saw yet more emphasis on percussion, particularly its use in minimalist music. Now, the percussion section can produce an entire piece. The marimba is a large xylophone, and here Steve Reich uses 6 of them to achieve the familiar phasing we feel in minimalist music. Rhythm section can be really effective, and very often it can be really effective when used in an unrhythmic fashion. Look how Tchaikovsky uses the cymbal in Romeo and Juliet, and how unnerving it is, because you can't quite predict where the beats are going to come. For picking out and recognising percussion instruments, I don't know how much you need to do that individually, but it always helps to have a handle on the timpani. Let's have a quick listen now. Can you hear these 2 famous notes? I have to say, I struggle a little to tell the timpani from the double basses here. Rewind if you want another go, because here comes the answers. So, be aware of the percussion section, both for the necessity of rhythm in your music and for the varied way it manages to deliver that rhythm. Percussion and rhythm represent the skeleton beneath the skin of music, underappreciated but always present. Please like and subscribe.